This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly, and good morning, Mike Rodgers.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Welcome to the Coffee with Kelly podcast.
Welcome,
Appreciate
Mike. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and let's get this thing started.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys having me, the invitation. Thank you for this. I am the CEO of a company called Critical Response Group, which is a business I founded back in 2016 when I left the military. My background briefly, because it's important to how the company got started, is I come from a long family of public safety professionals. My dad's a fifth generation cop. So that's what I thought the path was for me. But in the unfortunate days of 9/11, decided I wanted to serve in the military. Started at West Point, graduated at West Point, really kind of hit the war in Afghanistan in stride, deployed a number of times, and was introduced to a mapping technique during my time in the service. When I transitioned out of the special operations community and came home, I wanted to take that technique and initially applied it to my wife's school. And along that journey, figured out that her floor plans or the facility were both inaccurate, nor were they accessible to the first responders that needed them, and kind of set down a path to solve that on a national level. And today we've mapped a little over 13,000 public schools across the country. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
Man, so my first question right off the bat is like, when you first implemented that digital map as compared to just a static map, like what was the response there?
It was interesting. I think as we kind of went down there, as we do our sales presentation, we don't really sell anything. We just educate people on what the problem is and ultimately how to solve that problem, something we pride ourselves on. We always show the example of, the dusty binder sitting in the corner, and it's always gets a very, positive reaction of, yes, that's in fact what is here. And even a lot of the districts that'll take them being progressive and they digitize that information. One of the things that we found early on is that, of the 13,000 plus structures we have done work on, we have yet to find a single accurate floor plan really anywhere in the country. Not one. So at that point, we never started this company to make $1. We started it to solve a very specific problem and provide tools to schools and first responders. And we've just always focused on tackling the problem, which turned into, just mapping the schools initially, and then finding out all the school floor plans are wrong. Then it turned into, okay, now we have to actually walk all these structures to verify that the data is accurate. But imagine being a baby startup and you kind of have the tough realization that if you're truly interested in solving the problem, you actually have to go put boots on ground and walk the structure. And ultimately, as we kind of got in there and educated everybody on the problem, we've seen resounding support of what we're trying to do on a national level. So it's really just educating people on what the problem is, and then ultimately really bridging the gap between what the schools are using from a technical perspective and what the public safety professionals are using. And when you take that map from static to digital, we've prided ourselves on building a very robust partner network, because we're just a huge fan of, if we want to solve this problem of school safety on a national level, it's going to require everyone to work very closely together. And working with the best in class like Crisis Go, or a computer to dispatch program, or a 911 call handling solution. We just want to be the data that's agnostic and shared across the ecosystem of partners and players that are around the world.
So that brings up an interesting point, right? We're trying to solve the problem, right? And we talk about the difference between the static map, which we're all used to, and that not one of them being accurate. And I remember when I was at my district that I wanted maps for all of my schools. I wanted to be able to put those in my plans, right? And when I did that, I noticed that things that were labeled science lab ended up being transitioned into a computer lab, or they named that room after somebody else, and there was a common name for it. And I said, well, none of this stuff makes sense to me because I know these are not the names that are being used daily. So I told my facilities manager, I said, hey, we need to get our architect to change these. And he said, we can't. And I said, really, why? He says, well, because these are official maps. And so we have to get them approved by the state to change anything on the map.
Yep.
And so unless we have a critical need to do that, then we're not going to do that. And I said, but this goes to what you're saying and the accuracy and really having the ability of the individual schools to control that information and verify that information as to what things are being called, the numbering. And we know how many capital projects go on every year at these schools. There's a school in almost every district that's going under some changes. But when I was the GIS type maps were just coming into use in prominence, but they hadn't reached the schools yet. And so tell me, if you can, I know you can, if you will, that, that big difference between, that PDF file or that paper file of that map, and why do schools need a digital map? What is the difference, and why do we need those?
So you hit on a great point there, and there's actually 4 issues I want to walk through as to why the digital maps are really important. And you touched on the first one, is a lack of accurate labeling associated with the structure that's on top of the floor plans today, lack of nomenclature. So when you look at a set of floor plans, rarely does it say door 1 or door A or classroom 3 or the art room or the teacher's lounge or the nurse's office. The day-to-day vernacular and use of that structure is rarely on top of that. But Kelly, you know better than I do with your background that when someone picks up the phone and calls 911 or they hit a panic button, they're going to speak in the vernacular of that structure during that emergency. They're going to say, I'm having a heart attack in the teacher's lounge. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that we're gathering that information and that the labels accurately represent the structure. The second issue is that what we noticed, we didn't know this when we first started, is that building schematics and floor plans are designed in what's called project or plan north, which is arbitrary. So floor plans are actually oriented in different directions based on the architect who designed the building. So let's just talk about the schools in the state of Virginia as an example. We're doing a majority, a little over 95% of the schools across the state of Virginia today. As we started that project, literally every set of floor plans is rotated in a different cardinal direction. So you got to digitize them to flip them, put them on top of imagery so they're at least all facing the same direction. So as a police officer and a firefighter talking, your right and my right are the same exact thing. Left is left. And the third issue as it comes to the accuracy internal of the schematics is, unfortunately, school buildings across the country on average are 50 years old. That's 50 years of changes, renovations, and additions. And because of that reality, unfortunately, the floor plans are just simply not accurate. So lack of standard orientation, lack of accuracy of the actual building schematics, as they're all old and they're not labeled. So we can fix that when we digitize and amend those documents to have an accurate, reliable base layer. The next piece about going from PDF to digital, and there's a lot of misinformation in the space. When people look at the CRG map, a lot of them will say, it's just a PDF. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's actually a very smart piece of geospatial intelligence. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, just the reality that on the ground is you have to be able to create a PDF because some of the police departments only want to receive a PDF based on the technology that they have deployed. But they might also want to receive it as a cloud optimized GeoTIFF or an MB tile or a number of other standard file types out there. And when you digitize it and you bring it from that static paper to digital, you can then export it into all the systems relied upon by public safety. Because one of the last really important piece of the digitalization of the maps is that when you look at the true nature of an emergency response, you're going to have that school district who has procured different types of technology. They're going to have Crisis Go. They're going to have a video management solution. They're going to have pick your flavor of a tool that they bought to increase their security posture. But then you're going to have the public safety apparatus who's showing up to help in that emergency. And they're showing up with their computer aided dispatch system. They're going to be relying upon potentially a situation where in this mobile application, they're going to be relying upon mutual aid partners that are showing up with different tech. You're going to have a 911, public safety answering point on a different piece of tech. And unfortunately, in order to put everyone in the same common operating picture, the same map, you've got to digitize it and put it into the systems that they rely upon every day. So that's why it's so important, is to just make sure everyone's got the same basic lock document.
Right. So this, you brought in, and I'm just going to reinforce some of the things that you said, that we talk about almost, as soon as I say this, Ethan's going to roll his eyes, because that's what he does whenever I say things.
I'm ready for it.
That the standardization of the information that we are dealing with during an emergency, and the importance of that standardization. Everything's oriented true north, right? Everything, because even in some areas, we have the naming of the tactical naming of sides differently by agencies in the same area, but maybe law enforcement and fire.
Correct.
But if we are looking at the map and having those maps available to us, then we know right is right, left is left. We know where you're starting. And there's a grid system on your map, so it's A1, A2, what have you, right? And I cannot emphasize enough the standardization and the critical need to have things that are standardized. And as we look at the PDFs, the floor plans, those types of things, that is, to me, a very low level of usage. Let's say that. Do we need those? Yes. Do we need the ability for law enforcement and fire, first responders to plan their tactical maneuvers, get to the right place, do the right things? Yes. But they can do that with basically a static map, right? Mm-hmm. As long as they're doing it on the same map that everyone else is doing it on.
Correct.
And but when we start getting into, and we touched on this in the pre-show meeting real quickly. I wanted to make it sound like we were professional. A show meeting, the ability to transfer information to the people who need it, right? And in several incidences that I've been involved with, even though I might have been the incident commander, I always worked for somebody. I was never the top dog, mm-hmm. Right? So somebody above me is going to walk into wherever my space is and say, where are we at? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to, as soon as my temperature goes down because they're interrupting what I'm doing, my blood pressure goes down. But as soon as I do that, then I'm going to point to whatever document or whatever medium I have available to give them the best picture of what is occurring right now in the shortest amount of time. And when I say shortest amount of time, 5 seconds. I want to be able to do this. And I think, Mike, you've touched on this a little bit. Tell me what that does for you as a command or a person in leadership.
Absolutely. And that was really my experience on the battlefield. I was one of the officers fortunate enough to serve in the Ranger Regiment. And really in that position, you're communicating up and out, meaning the same exact experience that you shared, Kelly, being an incident commander on the ground. Everybody has a boss that's trying to pull information, and your ability to be clear and concise and provide a report to them so they can make a decision to drive resourcing at their altitude is extremely important. But you're really a middleman in this position, where I'm also pulling information from the people internal to a structure, the ones that are actually dealing with the direct threat, and I'm taking feeds from all different types of people, and it's got to run through me. I need a tool that I can communicate with them on the ground. That's the same exact tool I'm going to rely upon to condense what they tell me, all the noise into the information that's important, as I push that to higher headquarters. Mm-hmm. So, and that's where I think we really look at the importance and the simplicity of this tool that we brought off the battlefield. It does exactly what you're talking about. And the reason we're so passionate about the technique and the standards that have been developed in support of what it is that we're doing, it's because, war serves as this extremely unique laboratory to solve complex problems. And two of the problems, one you just touched on, was how do you communicate efficiently during an emergency? You have to have a language to do that. And then how do you navigate in an unfamiliar piece of terrain? And you're an incident commander external to a building you've never set foot in, you've never stepped in before. And you've got people that are looking at the signage internal to a structure, communicating about the location of a patient. And they got to communicate that to you, and you've got to take the nugget out and push it to higher. You need a tool to simplify that. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's where this whole thing was born out of, is to help that incident commander and also help the district as they're navigating the situation.
Right. And so for those of us who are reluctantly forced, go kicking and screaming every step of the way when somebody says ICS, Incident Command System, law enforcement, fire guys, they love it. They've fully embraced it. But regardless of what your thoughts are on ICS and so forth, you have to understand the principle of ICS. And that is, if you have a problem or a function that needs to be done, somebody is responsible for doing that. And so you have people, as an incident commander, you have people who are working for you. They're not always sitting right next to you. And as we touched on earlier, you have people who are above you, who want information, and they want to make sure that things aren't forgotten or are overlooked or what have you, or making sure everything's going as best as possible. Having a digital system allows literally everyone to look at the same map.
Same digital piece of paper.
Yep. The same digital display, even though they're 10 miles away, or they're 2 rooms away, where you have maybe the medical function working, the rescue function working, or the reunification function working. And they're in different areas, sometimes, several miles apart. But if they have that section chief up and looking at having that display up, then they can make the decisions, or at least start planning to get ahead of that curve, right? Mm-hmm. That response curve. And, from World According to Kelly, the best way for me to brief my superiors, unless they have specific questions, is that I don't ever see them, that they can get their own information somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That way I can continue to do my work, and then they can go to their little boardroom with the cushy chairs, pull up the TV and start looking at the same thing that I'm looking at. And they can go, okay, we got it. And then they might say, hey, Kelly, we don't understand what you're doing next. What are we doing? And then at least they're having informed questions, and we're having an informed discussion that can take significantly less time and effort from the incident commanders who has a zillion things being thrown at them at any given time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the digitalized map serves as the foundation that the planning and response is built upon. You've got to have a tool to work off of during an emergency that you can build everything on. And ultimately, that's really what this is intended to do.
Right. Explain to my son the content of this, or the context of this meeting and or this podcast. And he goes, why do I want a map more than once a year? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, because there's lots of reasons, right? And here's where we step up the level of digital maps. And we call them intelligent maps or smart maps or interactive maps, because given the right map and working with the right partners, it's not just about a pin on a map. It's about managing that pin. It's about managing your systems and the information that you can get from those systems. And literally every day, you could check the status of your map. Mm-hmm. As somebody who's responsible for your school building, you can literally take your map and go, how is everything looking today? Because with the right partners and the right systems working together, you can say, are all my doors functioning properly today? Is there one that's not functioning? How about my cameras? What's the closest camera to this incident? We can do all kinds of things just by that layering process and filtering process to get the information that we need to understand. And really, I'm not a techno nerd, but sometimes I get nerded out by technology. And to me, this is one of those aha things for me, right? Is the ability to track and manage all of our what I call assets through this, and having that map as the centerpiece for a dashboard.
Absolutely. Right. It's funny you relayed the story about communicating with your son. And I have this vignette I share on occasion where, I went to high school, a couple good friends went to high school with, I left to go in the military. Good buddy of mine stayed in town and became a police officer on the job in town where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And when I came back from overseas, I remember talking to him about mapping the schools, and was in the process of mapping the school that I went to high school in. And I stayed very close to him because I moved back home after, my time away. And him saying, Mike, I don't need a map of the school. I went to high school there. I was an SRO there for a little while. I don't need a map of the school. This is a waste of my time. And he called me about 2 years ago, and he said I was wrong. He said there's often a door alarm that'll go off on a Friday night, and we've got to go check the school. So he drove over to the school, and he goes, every time I would always, I look at the PDF that was in the in the squad car, but it was an old PDF. The doors weren't labeled on it because no one took the time to make it up to date. But the call would come in for the door alarm company and say, I need you to go check door 19. And he goes, I would park in the parking lot, and I'd start walking around. I'd see, 27. And I'd start walking the other direction. Oh, no. He said, he's the real story. When he said, when I received the maps and we uploaded them into the police department system, he said, you got a call in and said, hey, look, you need to go to door 7. So I pulled up the map. I saw where door 7 was. It was so basic, but I parked in the right parking lot. It literally saved me 3-4 minutes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's not during an emergency situation where there's no stress driving a bad decision, but it was a tremendous time savings because he simply parked in the right direction, right parking lot. And that's what this is. This is so fundamental to addressing the issue of asking responders to respond into a situation in a location they're not familiar with. We have a responsibility to give them the tools that they need so they can save a life and protect themselves as they're going in there to do their jobs.
Right. And that brings up a good point. It's not just you, the school, who's using those maps. You're providing you press the big red button, as I call it, the come help me button. You want the people who are actually coming to help you to understand what you need. Mm-hmm. And in order for them to do that, you have to provide them with what they need. And we talk about, Kelly talks about that initial, I call it the hour of chaos. Mm-hmm. When you press that button. Now that hour of chaos can be literally 20 seconds. And I've seen it last as long as 3 days, where there's an issue and you're trying to wrap your arms around what is actually happening. And the better the information that you are able to push out initially, the sooner they can wrap their arms around that problem and really start solving your problem, because that's what they're doing, is they're there to solve your problem for you. And having that information available is imperative.
Well, just the statistics associated with an individual who needs medical attention for a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
Every minute that they go without care, the survivability rate decreases significantly.
Right.
So our ability to provide that responder with a tool to drive a better navigational decision, let's say that makes it changes their response time by 3 seconds because they park at the right location, they go through the right door with the right equipment because they're just given the tools they need. That fundamentally changes a potentially terrific horrific outcome.
Where's the closest AED? Right. And looking at that, and as a safety team member, you have somebody who has some issue, some medical issue, whether it's a heart attack or whatever.
Yep.
Let's drive that response while our medical personnel are coming, and let's drive that response and say, your closest AED is up and around the corner to you.
Correct.
Yeah, yep. 50 feet away, as opposed to having to run all the way back to the office to get the one that's there. Right. Or fire extinguisher or main shutoff valve for the fire department, or I think they call it a supply valve, whatever they.
Yeah, and that's ultimately one of the things that we do in our process. Because we go on site, we know the types of critical features that responders are going to look for during an emergency. So we conduct the scavenger hunt and meet with the site staff ahead of time, pre-incident, left to bang, to say, okay, where are the AEDs located? Where's the fire access control panel? What are the key critical things, so that all of that's been identified, pre-incident.
Ethan, did you hear that? Did you hear what he said?
I've been hearing that a lot lately.
What was that?
Left of bang. Is that what you're referring to?
Left of bang. All of the stuff that you have to do before there's an incident, right?
Go figure.
We talk about that quite a bit, and
I think that's Kelly's favorite topic, because it's a good topic.
Here's
I'm just
why
saying it's your favorite.
It's a good topic, and here's why it's Kelly's favorite. Because, hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it. There's a military saying: the more you bleed in practice, the less you bleed in battle, or something to that effect. Right? Left of bang is everything you have to do, all of the effort that you have to put into the response or the prevention of. And left of bang to me is an easy depiction of and visualization of that effort. And left of bang starts right now to help prevent and stop whatever we're going to do, or prepare ourselves to respond in response to our failures to prevent.
Absolutely. Right. I couldn't agree more, Kelly, because when that bang happens, you are relying upon what you did previously. And if it's bad, you're relying on bad stuff.
Yep. And, the other, we use it a lot in law enforcement, and I know we stole it from likely the military, is you always, in response, you resort to your level of training. If your level of training is bad, your response is going to be horrible. And if you don't understand even the basic objectives, if you can understand these 3 objectives: stop the killing, stop the dying, start the recovery. If you can understand those 3, you can probably work your way through it. Probably, I'm not saying you could, but you probably could work your way through it a lot better, because now you have direction. But all of those 3 objectives start long before bang goes off. Right? It's not just after the first shots are fired or the first building blows up or what have you. It's now, and you're really trying to stop any fatalities, any injuries, those types of things. So that all starts now, and I love it, especially when it's unsolicited. When we start talking to our partners and they go, "Yeah, we're working on left of bang." Yep. Or left of, what was the one that they used the other day? It was the same thing, but they were reluctant to say bang. Boom? Was it boom?
I can't remember.
Funny, because I giggled.
There's a lot of great companies out there trying to do the right thing, and I think that's why we're proud of our relationship with Crisis Go and lots of other partners out there that are just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
You got to be proactive.
Yeah, and here's the importance of today's conversation. Idea or the question, why do I need a map? Why do I need a map more than once a year? Why is because literally that's the foundation, because you're going to start putting everything on that map.
Yeah.
You're going to start relating everything, all of your systems, all of your security and safety assets to that map. And when you start your planning processes for your operations plans, your emergency operations plans, your response plans, it's going to relate to the map. Your exit routes to the map, your reunification sites to the map. And a lot of these things can be and should be pre-planned out, but having I remember going to my kids' schools or a hotel because the hotel has similar mapping challenges.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a hotel room and it has a floor plan of a floor. It's probably the same for all 12 floors, but it has a floor plan. And then based upon your room, it has a little red arrow that shows you which way to go.
Yep.
But it doesn't tell you if you go to the left like you're supposed to and there's a problem there. It doesn't go, or try this way, right? And the ability to change those maps, I mean, obviously you want to plan best case scenario, but you have to have maps that saying, okay, if we have an incident, I use this a lot because schools use it a lot. Their evacuation assembly areas or their football fields, because that's the biggest place that they can hold the entire student population kind of in a confined area. But what do you do if that's the site of the incident? You had a plane crash, you had a hazardous materials spill, you had a gas leak or what have you. Now, what do you do? Where are your alternative zones? Where are your alternative pathways should the fire that you're talking about or what have you is blocking your normal route? You can change those pretty quick.
Well, there's a saying in the military, Kelly, that no plan survives initial contact.
Right.
Meaning that you can have a plan that could be the most perfectly dialed in plan possible, but the second you start getting shot at or something bad happens, it's your responsibility as a leader to adjust to make your organization be successful. And you've got to your point, you come outside and there's an issue to your right. Well, you've got to be able to flex and go left. And ultimately, that's another one of the reasons why the mapping and ultimately the digitization of that, it becomes the fundamental tool that is used, one, to help you plan, but then also more importantly, help you adjust that plan in a very efficient way and also communicate the adjustment of the plan across your organization. Because that's what we've seen the data really turn into, is it's becoming the language that is being used across the public safety and the school security industry, because it just relates to the structure. We can speak in the vernacular of the structure because we have it in front of us. So.
Yeah, Mike Tyson put it the best way. Everyone has a plan to be Mike Tyson until I punch him in the face. Right? Something like that. But yeah, I remember the first time I implemented a drill that was contrary to the routine. And I literally got the phone call. What are we supposed to do? I don't know. What are you supposed to do? It had to do with the incident was at that's why I talk about this. The incident was at the football field and they could not use the football field. What do you want me to do? I said, well, you tell me. This is your emergency, not mine. I'm going to come, 20 minutes later to help you out. But what are you doing? Can we use the baseball field? Sure. If it works for the scenario, it can. Could you use the tennis courts? Yes. Could you use the parking lots? maybe, because all their parking lots are full, right? So it's those types of things, but you got to get people thinking that way. So Ethan, what do you got to say? What other questions do you have?
Well, you were talking about, the interactive part of the maps, and I think one of my favorite parts is the real time aspect of it. That, as you were saying, that if your normal evacuation route is left, but then you can't go left because of something's in the way, whatever, right? And you have to go this way. And in a collaborative environment, being the map, they can edit that navigation route in real time. Like, to have that ability is like just so cool to me, and everyone can access that.
Yeah, and I've seen our maps as the base layer sitting inside Crisis Go. When you guys go and adjust that route, again, we're just the base layer that this response and planning is built upon. And
right.
we leverage the great, the tech that you have in there, and then you leverage, let's say, a Blue Force tracking capability that the first responders are using, and everyone's showing up with their piece of the puzzle. But the same base layer, the same digital piece of paper exists. It just allows us to work together, make better decisions.
And the best part of it, literally, we can make contingency layers that are hidden by filters.
Yep.
And we can pre-plan that if you're so inclined. Yep. And we can work through a lot of these contingencies long before, so that we're not doing that. And we can do scenario-based training where we can indicate, you can do it real time at an actual incident. Here, put a pin down. Here is where our bad actor is. This is where the fire is. This is where the gas leak is. And we can call that a danger zone or what have you, or an exclusion zone, however you guys want to do that, as long as everyone understands what that is. And we can then make routes, safe exit routes during those times, right? Or for those incidences. But we can have, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, so please don't write Ethan and tell him to tell me to correct myself. But we can have a lot of layers, if not infinite number of layers, and filter through those layers as we need to. It's just, it allows us as emergency managers, as people who are responsible for training our end users, our teachers, our building staff. It's a great training tool that we can use. It is for tabletop exercises. Throw it up on, Apple TV or whatever TV that you're using, throw it up there, and let's talk through those and use these tools as a training mechanism for your people. Left of bang stuff.
So Kelly, during this conversation, I've noted that we've gone over every phase of emergency management of where you can utilize maps. So it's not just one of these things where you need to use it just once every month or year, whatever, like we've been talking about it. You can literally use it every single day.
What are those phases that we've touched on?
I got to get this right, because I always mix up the first two.
Right?
I overthink it and I switch the first two in my mind. It's prevention, preparation, response, recovery. I always mix up the
prevention / mitigation. Right? If we can't prevent it, how are we going to decrease the impact, minimize or mitigate the impact, right? And so that's first of all, congratulations, you got it right in the right
about
order.
Time.
But the effort part is prevention, mitigation, preparedness. The response and recovery are right of bang, right? So, but we touched on all of that stuff. And because if you're using your maps correctly, you're using them to walk your school to identify hazards, to identify gaps in your security systems, identify slip and fall hazards, missing equipment and assets. You're using the map to do all of that stuff, and you're marking on the map, and you're saying, oh, this door isn't working, or this fire extinguisher is expired, it needs to be replaced, what have you. You really should be looking through that process of using the map as the foundation of what you are doing, because you're asking people to do something, and oftentimes that something that they're doing is directly related to their location on that map.
So I mean, it's pretty obvious, obviously, to us, the value of maps. Yet there are schools who are not using interactive digital maps. So my question to that is why? Or what are their struggles? What are the barriers?
It's just a lack of education. Okay. I do truly believe everybody wants to do the right thing, but it's just a matter of them being educated on what they need to do to continue to advance the ball and prepare better.
Yeah, I think that's one. I think that's I think it warrants a Kelly question on there. Is we're coming up on Columbine. How much more prepared are you today than you were 25 years ago? And we have a lot of people who are still struggling with that, and we're 25 years down that road. And it's because they don't know where to start. They don't know, they don't have the expertise, they don't know where to start. And it's one of those things where you got to be a student of school safety. Yep. You have to understand this. Again, our
was not expecting that.
Oh man, I'm keeping that in there.
Right, you should. Too funny, because I'm not a big fan of cats to begin with, but I am at my son's house, who has a cat, and that's the second time he passed. But the first time he did it correctly and went behind the camera.
Oh, okay.
This time he decided.
You got a little more brave on the second time.
He wanted to be the star of the show. We have to be a student of school safety, and we have to look at things that. I know time is valuable. I know budgets are valuable. Funds are relatively short. Let's say that, I guess, lacking. But look at those systems that give you the best bang for your buck. And I am not saying, okay, you need everything tomorrow. We've advocated you need to get the right foundational stuff put into your systems, spend the money that will allow you to grow, allow you to expand, and allow you to go at your pace. And I think mapping is fundamental to that. And once we have people who understand mapping and the potential for mapping, we're going to be so much further along, because we're going to have a lot of people who understand the fundamentals. Yep. and where to start. Because really the best place to start is with that first step. Whatever you start, because it's really that first step of 10,000 miles or whatever that saying is.
I think you did a blog on that.
I did. Did you read it?
I probably read it like 3 times.
Oh, awesome.
Probably.
That was the cat. Anything else, Mike?
No, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here today and kind of tell a little bit of the story. And it's been an engaging conversation. I really appreciate talking with an expert.
Yeah. Ethan says you're welcome.
I was debating making a joke, and I'm like, nah, I don't know if I want to do it.
Yeah, you could. Because you know the definition of an expert, right?
Yep.
Somebody who knows a little bit more than the average person.
That's true.
But I appreciate what you guys are doing. I applaud what you guys are doing, and I'm grateful that to have partners who are going in the same direction.
Yep.
And are like-minded, and certainly CRG is one of those partners, and
Definitely.
We value that greatly.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. Same with you guys. We love the relationship, love the integration, and excited to see what we can continue to do together.
Yeah, because none of us can do it by ourselves. None of us. And
that's the problem. Some people think that they can.
Yep.
And they're ultimately, it's turned into more of a business than it is into solving a problem. So
yeah,
it's a partnership approach. That's the only way to actually do it properly.
That's how schools benefit the most. That's the whole goal. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.